Marie de' Medici has gone down in history as one of France's most catastrophic rulers, an incompetent, extravagant Italian interloper who bankrupted the treasury, possibly orchestrated her husband's assassination, corrupted her son, and died in well-deserved poverty after a lifetime of political disasters. For centuries, historians accepted this narrative without question. But the real Marie de' Medici was a traumatized orphan thrust into impossible political circumstances, judged by brutal double standards that no male ruler faced, who created artistic treasures that still define Paris today while navigating crises that would have destroyed far more experienced politicians. This is not the story of a scheming villain or a martyred saint, but of a deeply damaged woman whose life exposes the systematic difficulty of female power in early modern Europe. Marie was born April 26, 1575, at the Palazzo Pitti in Florence, the sixth daughter of Francesco III de' Medici, Grand Duke of Tuscany, and Joanna of Austria. Through her father, she descended from Europe's greatest banking dynasty. Through her mother, from the Holy Roman Emperors. It should have been a charmed beginning. It absolutely wasn't. When Marie was just 3 years old, her mother died in agony. Joanna, who suffered from severe scoliosis, fell downstairs while heavily pregnant, gave birth to a premature stillborn son, and died the next day from a ruptured uterus. Marie's father immediately married his longtime mistress, Bianca Capello, literally the next day, and forced young Marie to take lessons alongside Antonio, his bastard son by Bianca. The trauma kept coming. By the time Marie was 12, both her father and stepmother had died mysteriously at a villa outside Florence, possibly poisoned, though never proven, and modern thinking is that they died of malarial fever. Of 8 children born to Francesco and Joanna, only Marie and her sister Eleonora survived to adulthood. Multiple siblings died throughout her childhood. Earthquakes rocked the palace twice. Lightning struck her bedroom 3 times. Marie's childhood reads like the origin story of someone who'd grow up with serious trust issues and a need for control. Her uncle Ferdinando became her guardian and at least provided stability. He ensured Marie received an excellent education: mathematics, philosophy, astronomy, classical languages, French, Spanish, drawing, and music. She was particularly talented at mathematics and art. But she was raised in what sources call guarded isolation, with limited knowledge of the social workings of the world. This would matter enormously later. Most significantly, Marie formed an intense attachment to Leonora Galigai, a companion provided by her stepmother. Leonora became the mother figure, sister, and best friend Marie had never had. Contemporary sources note the princess would not make decisions without talking to Leonora first. For a traumatized child who'd lost every parental figure by age 12, this dependency made perfect psychological sense. It would also destroy her politically. By 1600, Marie was 25, well past prime marrying age for a princess. She'd been on the marriage market for 13 years. Negotiations with various princes had all failed. Finally, a match materialized with the most unlikely candidate, Henry IV of France, the Protestant-turned-Catholic king who'd supposedly declared Paris is worth a mass. The marriage was purely transactional. Henry owed the Medici Bank 1,174,000 écus for loans funding his wars. Marie brought a dowry of 600,000 écus, with another 1 million paid up front to cancel the debt. Henry's jealous mistress, Henriette d'Entragues, mockingly called Marie la grosse banquière, the fat banker. They married by proxy on October 5, 1600 in Florence, with Marie not meeting Henry until December 9th in Lyon. Their first encounter was profoundly disturbing. Henry, unable to wait for the official meeting, burst into Marie's room the night before while she was already in bed, presented himself in wet traveling clothes, and began covering her with caresses, saying he hoped to spend the night since no bed had been prepared for him. Marie, whose severe Florentine upbringing had in no way prepared her for a muddy king making advances in her bedchamber, was horrified. The next day after the official ceremony, she did nothing but weep. The marriage succeeded in exactly one area: reproduction. Over 9 years, Marie bore 6 children: Louis, the future Louis XIII, in 1601, Elizabeth in 1602, Christine in 1606, Nicolas Henri in 1607, who died at 4, Gaston in 1608, and Henrietta Maria in 1609. As one court observer noted, the king takes the queen only for breeding purposes, exactly as Henry II had treated Catherine de' Medici. Everything else was misery. Henry's mistress, Henriette d'Entragues, who actually possessed a written promise from Henry that he'd marry her if she bore him a son, tormented Marie relentlessly. Henry housed Henriette close enough to force Marie to dine with them both. Henriette called Marie the fat banker to her face, claimed her own children were the legitimate heirs, and branded the Dauphin Louis a bastard. When Marie quarrelled with her in language that shocked French courtiers, Henry never defended his wife. Marie was, sources note, of a very jealous temperament and refused to accept her husband's numerous infidelities. The shock here isn't Marie's jealousy, it's that anyone expected her to accept a situation where her husband's mistress lived in the palace, called her children illegitimate, and joined them for dinner. They effectively separated from 1603 to 1606. In the last years, Marie had, as she later admitted, been afraid of her husband because he had threatened to send her back to Italy, and she even thought he might kill her. Yet Marie desperately wanted one thing: to be officially crowned Queen of France. For years, Henry refused. Historians speculate he feared that once crowned, she'd have too much legitimacy. Finally, in May 1610, as Henry prepared for war against the Holy Roman Empire, he relented. Marie was crowned on May 13, 1610, at Saint-Denis. The timing would prove catastrophically convenient. May 14, 1610, the day after the coronation, Henry left the Louvre around 3 p.m. to visit his sick finance minister. He declined his guard escort. His carriage got stuck in traffic on the narrow Rue de la Ferronnerie. A red-haired man climbed onto the wheel and stabbed the king twice in the chest. Henry was dead within minutes. The assassin, François Ravaillac, made no attempt to escape. He was a 32-year-old failed monk who'd been rejected by both the Feuillants and Jesuits for being prey to visions. He believed God wanted him to convince Henry to convert all Huguenots to Catholicism. When he couldn't meet the king, he interpreted Henry's planned war as an attack on the Pope and decided to stop it by murder. The timing immediately raised suspicions. Marie had been crowned literally the day before. The Duke of Épernon, her ally, was in the carriage but made no attempt to protect Henry. Épernon took custody of Ravaillac, bringing him to his own house where no one knows what went on. When the investigation began, Épernon threatened to stab a judge who wanted to investigate his or the Queen's role. For centuries, rumours persisted that Marie knew of or orchestrated the assassination. During the French Revolution, revolutionaries dug up her corpse and tore out her hair, calling her a husband killer. But modern scholarship has definitively established the truth. There is absolutely no credible evidence that Marie was involved in any way. Ravaillac was tortured with unimaginable brutality, molten lead poured into his wounds, limbs torn apart by horses, yet he insisted repeatedly that he acted alone. The torture was so severe he must have been telling the truth. Ravaillac was a lone religious fanatic, one of many Catholic extremists who never forgave Henry for tolerating Protestants. Within hours of Henry's death, Parliament confirmed Marie as regent for 8-year-old Louis XIII. She immediately secured the Louvre, placed her children under guard, banished Henry's mistress, and tried to maintain stability. The challenges were staggering. She was a foreign Italian facing xenophobia, a woman facing misogyny, a Catholic trying to balance Protestant and Catholic factions, confronting rebellious nobles who smelled weakness, dealing with an empty treasury, and raising a traumatized, difficult son. Her regency has been portrayed as 7 years of disaster. The reality was far more complex. Despite being devoutly Catholic, Marie continued Henry's military support to Protestant allies in Germany. She repeatedly confirmed the Edict of Nantes protecting Protestant rights in 1612, 1614, and twice in 1615. Modern historian Jean-François Dubos argues that, from the perspective of Protestant political guarantees, Marie de Medici's regency was a golden age. But Marie made two fatal errors. First, she elevated her childhood friend Leonora and Leonora's husband Concino Concini to ridiculous heights of power. Concini became Marshal of France despite never fighting a battle. He built a private house connected to the Louvre. The Italian favourites became lightning rods for every grievance against the regency. Over 100 hostile pamphlets blamed these foreign adventurers for France's problems. Second, she completely mishandled her relationship with her son. Louis XIII was a traumatized, anxious boy who'd been regularly whipped on his mother's orders. He once said after a beating, "I would be better pleased with less obeisance and less whipping." When he reached legal majority at 13 in 1614, Marie refused to give up power, deeming him too weak in body and spirit. Louis found affection with his falconer, Charles d'Albert, Duke of Luynes, who became a surrogate father figure and began plotting Marie's overthrow. On the morning of April the 24th, 1617, Louis was 15, he ordered Concini's arrest. But the conspirators decided to kill him instead. As Concini approached the Louvre, 3 bullets were fired. He died instantly. The Parisian mob found the body, dug it up, dragged it through streets, mutilated it, and burned it. Leonora was dragged to the Bastille, convicted of witchcraft in a sham trial, and beheaded. Marie was exiled to Blois. Louis declared with satisfaction, "At last, I am truly king." Marie spent 2 years under guard at Blois. Then on the night of February 21st, 1619, the 43-year-old woman, described as corpulent, executed one of history's most dramatic prison breaks. She climbed out her window and down a ladder, barefoot for better grip. The drop was either 25 or 120 feet, depending on the source. When she lost her nerve partway down, assistants created a makeshift rope hammock to lower her. She escaped to launch a rebellion against her son. Twice Marie went to war against Louis, the wars of mother and son. Both times she lost. But here's what's remarkable. Louis forgave her. When Luynes died in 1621, Louis realized he needed competent advisors and actually invited his mother back. She returned to the royal council in 1622. And Marie had a new protégé, Armand Jean du Plessis, better known as Cardinal Richelieu. She had made his entire career, getting him appointed Secretary of State, securing his cardinal's hat, and convincing Louis to make him chief minister in 1624. Richelieu was her creation, which makes what happened next even more brutal. Richelieu quickly realized that real power lay with the king, not the Queen Mother. When Marie opposed his anti-Spanish, pro-Protestant foreign policy, Richelieu simply cut her out. Marie, who still didn't understand her son's personality after 29 years, believed she could force Louis to choose between her and Richelieu. November the 11th, 1630, the day of the dupe. Marie confronted Louis at Luxembourg Palace, raging against Richelieu, calling him a valet, demanding his dismissal. Louis seemed to agree. Everyone thought Richelieu was finished. But Louis slipped away to Versailles and that evening summoned Richelieu for a private conversation. The king chose his minister over his mother. Louis never saw Marie again. Marie fled to the Spanish Netherlands in July 1631. By going to Spain, France's enemy, she gave Louis the excuse to strip her of her titles and pensions. For 11 years, she wandered Europe, Brussels, Amsterdam, London, finally Cologne. She died on July the 3rd, 1642, aged 67, in a house loaned by Rubens. She died, as sources note, in almost total poverty, destitute. No family members were present. Her body was held for a year until her debts were paid. She outlived Richelieu by 5 months and Louis XIII by 10 months. Her last possession, a pet parrot, she left to Richelieu, the man whose death she'd been plotting for years. Even in death, the irony was inescapable. But while Marie failed at politics, she succeeded brilliantly at something else: patronage. and her legacy lived on through it. The Luxembourg Palace, which she began building in 1615, still stands as one of Paris's architectural treasures, now housing the French Senate. She explicitly modelled it on her childhood home, the Palazzo Pitti, bringing Italian Renaissance style to France. The Luxembourg Gardens remain one of Paris's most beloved public spaces. But her greatest commission was the Rubens cycle, 24 massive paintings, each 13 feet tall, depicting her life in mythological allegory. These paintings, now in the Louvre, are considered among Rubens' greatest works. They were revolutionary, the first time a living woman had received such monumental artistic commemoration. Marie used art to write her own history, transforming political disasters into divine triumph through mythology. She was also patron of early opera. Her 1600 wedding featured performances that marked opera's birth as an art form. She brought Italian musicians and poets to France, sponsored ballets where she herself danced, and used performance as political propaganda asserting Bourbon legitimacy. The psychological portrait that emerges is heartbreaking in its clarity. Marie was a woman shaped by profound childhood trauma. Mother dead at 3, father remarried to his mistress immediately, forced to study alongside bastard siblings, orphaned completely by 12. She developed what we'd now recognize as attachment disorder, clinging desperately to Leonora Galigai as the only stable relationship she'd ever known. When stressed, she defaulted to the only model of power she understood: absolute control, the very thing she'd never had as a child. Her greatest tragedy was that she never learned to read people accurately. Raised in isolation at the Medici court, married to a man who despised her, surrounded by courtiers who mocked her as the fat banker, she never developed the emotional intelligence successful rulers need. She couldn't see that Richelieu was using her. She couldn't understand that her son feared and resented her. She kept trying to force relationships through power rather than earning them through understanding. She was neither monster nor martyr, but something more interesting. A damaged, difficult, creative, destructive, complex human being whose life demonstrates exactly how impossible it was to be a powerful woman in early modern Europe. Her failures were real but explicable. Her successes were limited but lasting. Her story was tragic but human. 4 centuries after her death, Marie de Medici is getting something she never received in life. Not vindication, not glorification, but simple recognition of her humanity. The woman they called the fat banker created more lasting beauty than most of her critics. The queen they called incompetent navigated crises that would have destroyed stronger rulers. The mother they called evil loved her children badly but genuinely. She was, in the end, exactly what her enemies could never admit: an ordinary person, flawed, fascinating, and ultimately far more interesting than the caricature they created. In death, if not in life, that has to be enough. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any new documentaries.